Hello everyone, Hexabu here, and this is part 3 of Unity of Command 2 Barbarossa DLC, and before we get to the mission guides, I'd like to discuss 2 things with you. One, the DLC has absolutely sucked me in, help me, and I'm actually doing another run of the campaign on hard difficulty. And having gone through about 2/3 of it, I highly recommend you to, once you're done with the campaign on whatever difficulty it is, easy, normal, or classic, to try it again on a high difficulty level, because it does change the game, and it will force more efficient decisions and less sloppy gameplay out of you, sometimes even making you to rethink the strategy in missions you thought of as familiar. Case in point, the Yatkosota mission, which I covered last time and which on classic is one of the 2 missions in this campaign that I finished on first try and didn't find to be difficult at all. The problem is that on hard, the enemy has a little bonus to their battle outcomes, and your forces don't anymore have that significant firepower advantage as they do in classic. You simply can't expect to kill all of your enemies and take all of your objectives on time. And the solution to this problem, as is usual with the Unity of Command, is cutting enemy supply. Karelian Isthmus isn't that difficult, but you can always do well if you cut off that mechanized division, which isn't too difficult. But in the east, you really have to resort using those dirt roads to cut off supply at Podporozhye and Medvezhegorsk. It's actually possible to get that cavalry unit in the hex behind Medvezhegorsk, so that the town is completely empty by turn 14. It does take some trickery with supplies and HQ abilities, as I'll demonstrate in the full playthrough of this mission, which I'll link to at the end of this video. In any case, the point is, go challenge yourself. You might just find new ways to enjoy this game. The second little point I'd like to talk about concerns cards and the way I use them. At least for these guides, I never buy any during conferences because the selection of the cards you're offered is randomized and there's just no way to guarantee that you get what I get. Also, during missions, I only use cards when I know that I'm getting a replacement for that card during that mission. I just never keep more than 1 card of the same type in my reserve, so if I know that a particular objective gives me a truck card, I will use the one I have right from the start and have fewer supply problems. This way, I'm never stuck in a mission where I don't have cards or I don't have the cards I need, and I always have that additional supply and bomber support if I really need it. But then there's that Naval Bombardment card, which you get during the Heeresgruppe Nord mission. And throughout the campaign, I was kind of saving it for the Sevastopol Assault mission, which is an alternative history scenario, and I kind of expected it to be more difficult than everything else. In fact, it's laughably easy, and you really don't need that card there. My second candidate would be another city on the Black Sea coast. Odessa is the hardest scenario of the DLC, but the problem is that none of the difficult objectives there are on the coast, so naval support is not really critical there. So my answer to where to best use the naval bombardment card is Schlüsselburg. So let's look into that mission, shall we? Schlüsselburg presents us with what seems to be the smallest map of this entire DLC, and as such, it might seem to be easy, and it kind of is. But there are still a few sticking points that might prevent you from getting all of the objectives on time and actually losing some of your elite divisions. So the first thing you have to deal with is eliminating the pockets with the pocket objective, and I urge you to destroy as many troops there as you can, as quickly as you can. The objective itself is really easy, but there have been a few times when I just forgot about leftover Soviet troops there who eventually cut my supply lines and forced me to restart the mission. So be a cold mother effer and destroy all of them. Now on to the objectives that are really hard. You should reserve your flying artillery use for Schlüsselburg itself and equip the motorized and infantry divisions closest to it with as much artillery as you can. This is a heavily forested and swampy area, and you will not be able to bring lots of firepower there by turn 4. So your strategy will be to use flying artillery on Schlüsselburg and then break into the town with an infantry division that has 2 artillery steps. Make sure that the division that enters the town is strong on its own, because the Soviets will almost certainly try to counterattack them. And speaking of counterattacks, let's look at the other side of the Karelian Isthmus. In and of themselves, the objectives at Oranienbaum and Gulf of Finland aren't particularly difficult, and problems arise when you actually capture them, and the Soviets, who, as you can see, have overwhelming forces, will indeed try to counterattack. And if you approach the Gulf of Finland, which will most probably be your first objective to take, if you approach that objective via the forest, the tank division that enters there will have nowhere to retreat and it will get cornered with the first Soviet attack. I actually lost 2 elite tank divisions there on my first successful try of this mission. So don't trust that Ivan Susanin in the forest and blast through the already destroyed bunkers next to it. That way is not significantly more difficult, and it's a plain hex, so whoever enters the Gulf of Finland will be able to easily retreat. So this is what you should do. Break through the bunkers towards the Gulf of Finland, give the unit that enters the Gulf of Finland the rear guard so that they retreat without losing anything and forcing the Soviets to expose themselves and let you kill them some more as you gradually improve your position and eventually take both of the objectives. And actually using your naval bombardment card there will boost your chances significantly. There is a Soviet division on the coast next to Gulf of Finland that has a heavy artillery step, and it loves using fire superiority on whoever enters the Gulf of Finland. Actually suppressing that step will prevent them from doing that. So, Yelnya is another defensive/offensive scenario in the style of Ukraine, and as many of you know, it models the first successful land offensive against the Germans in World War II, even though its outcome ultimately was rather dubious. What this means for us is that the AI really wants to take Yelnya, and potentially Rzhev as well. They'll start pushing right from the start, and they will be able to deal a lot of damage to your troops. So it's very important to defend in a flexible way. One, having an elite or at least veteran infantry unit equipped with an artillery and an AT gun in Yelnya proper is pretty much a guarantee that the Soviets will not try to attack it head on. You can actually use that static unit to launch small-scale counterattacks against the attacking Soviets. But your main task is preventing them from completely surrounding Yelnya and cutting off the supply. So I devote a couple of mechanized division of Panzergruppe 3 to fight off any Soviet incursions on the flanks of Yelnya. Just make sure you don't get those units in a situation where they can easily get cornered and destroyed, because the Soviets will use every opportunity to do that. Attack and retreat keep Yelnya supplied. The Soviets will also try to break through north of Rzhev. So keep an eye on the infantry defenses there, and have a couple more mechanized divisions as fire brigades to handle any potential breakthroughs. Actually, if your mechanized divisions there are strong enough, you can even launch a counterattack and cut the railway that feeds the Soviet attacking force off. The rest of the Panzergruppe 3 divisions should go south, where the offensive operation will take place. Speed is extremely important here, so I highly advise you to take Pochep on turn 1. The Soviets have craploads of troops here, and they can stop you by sheer volume. So dealing with these side objectives like Pochep and Trubchevsk is important in order for you to have as much firepower as possible once they're taken. Don't forget that Trubchevsk is a secondary objective and you don't have to hold it, so whoever takes it, you may leave that place immediately. Also, don't underestimate the value of recon planes in the area between Starodub and Shostka. It might actually allow you to maneuver in between Soviet divisions and reach Shostka on turn 4. The rule of thumb here, if you cross the river next to Shostka by the end of turn 3, you're doing alright. Once Shostka is yours, you don't have to keep it once again. Take the Soviet supply hub in the area and rush towards the road bridge north of Konotop. You're probably not going to be able to reach that objective via the railway, it's too congested there. Simultaneously with your mechanized push on Shostka, your infantry and cavalry around Gomel should slowly clear the area towards Chernigov and move there. I've found that having a few units with lots of artillery, especially the yellow heavy artillery, is critical in blasting through the defensive line that the Soviets have there. I also recommend you to watch out for that railway bridge between Konotop and Chernigov. Try to take it intact because it will turn into a vital supply line for your tanks operating around Konotop and rushing towards Chernigov, which is ultimately your goal as you envelop it with your infantry from the north and your tanks from the south. You are very likely to only have one turn to take Chernigov, so make sure you bring as much firepower, as many artillery steps to the town as you can. The Battle of Kiev, at least the 1941 one, is one of the biggest and overwhelming successes of the German army in that war, and the Kiev mission in this DLC is great at conveying the feeling of achieving something as huge as this militarily. So the mission is rather easy, and your first and main task here is to cut both the railway lines that feed Kiev proper. So oversupply those tank and motorized divisions near Konotop and just rush across both these railways. By the end of turn 2, all of the Soviet troops west of Lochvitsa must be cut off for you to succeed. I also recommend taking Lochvitsa itself on turn 2 as well, so that you can free up your tanks and not worry about that objective anymore. Your second main push, and that one is going to be slightly more difficult, is going to be towards Poltava. And in addition to taking the city itself, which will almost certainly take place on turn 5, you really need to cut that railway line between Poltava and Mirgorod, because it effectively feeds everything west of Poltava, meaning that the Soviets will turn into stragglers in just a couple of turns. So break through at Kremenchug or east of it and deal with that task as well. Don't leave any defenders in the area around Shostka. It's not an objective, 1, and 2, the Soviets will be very passive there, so you really don't need any defenses there. Don't shy away from using your infantry around Chernigov. They'll probably not achieve a decisive breakthrough, even though that depends on your difficulty level. Even if they manage to bleed the Soviet troops there and push towards that railway between Konotop and Kiev, they will have achieved a significant result, because that stretch of railway is critical in supplying your troops in the area and supplying your tanks rushing towards Kiev Crossing from the east and the north, and ultimately taking the objective. The rest of your troops should sit where they are and wait for the Soviets to run out of supply and be destroyed for experience. I found Donbas Blitz to be very faithful to its name. In the best traditions of blitzkrieg and deep operations, you break through enemy lines and then go as deep as it gets. So the entire battle will take the form of a two-pronged attack. And let's look at the southern section, shall we? The easiest, most bloodless way of dealing with Tatar Ditch is equipping one of the divisions next to it with an artillery step and then using set-piece attack. It leads to a very high probability of retreat, especially with heavier artillery, and you are very likely to get the objective on turn 1. Next up, the Soviets will try to retake Belozerka. You must prevent them from taking it, but it's not too difficult. Give that Romanian infantry an artillery step, and next turn, entrench it, even though it's not that necessary. Setting up the defensive line to the east of the village with your Romanian divisions will be sufficient to hold out for one turn, from which point defending the village is not going to be an issue, because you'll get crap loads of reinforcements in the area, and you will cut off the supply lines for the attacking enemies. That's right, you'll break through northwest of Melitopol and advance as far as possible. Cross the railway line feeding Melitopol and position all of your Romanian tanks and cavalry for a mad dash towards Bryansk and that level 3 Soviet supply hub between Zaporozhye and Mariupol. Cutting that railway line is critical in winning this mission. Use the troops you have remaining in the south to mop up the Soviet defenders, because these divisions are very unlikely to catch up with the mobile Romanian divisions, so don't even bother. In the north, it should be slightly easier. Set up a bridge west of Dnipropetrovsk and then use your tanks to blast through east, while your forces in the city proper break out towards Pavlograd. You may leave the Zaporozhye bridge undefended. If the bridge is undefended, the AI occasionally sends those two nearby infantry divisions, hoping to cut your supply lines, but they are easily stopped and they are way too slow to cause any real supply problems. problems. At the same time, it's very nice not to have them near Pavlodar, where they usually go. In the subsequent turns, take Pavlograd, which should be easy, and take the little railway section between the two cities, because holding that railway is critical for achieving success in this mission. I also highly recommend you not to leave any Soviet cavalry around. The AI will only be so happy to use them to cut your supply lines at the worst moment possible. In any case, move those tank and motorized divisions towards Stalino as soon as you reasonably can. Don't wait for the situation in Pavlograd to clear completely. Oversupply is your friend here. Once you reach Stalino and you know that there are no threats to the railway supplying you, immediately send 2 divisions to take Taganrog. Remember that you have to take it before Stalino, and I highly recommend you to keep the flying artillery use. Specifically for Taganrog, even though the defenders there are weak, you've got very little time to take the town, and an unlucky attack without an overrun might stop your tanks in their place and prevent you from taking the bloody town. Stalino itself isn't going to be a problem because you have plenty of time. You could use air attacks just to kick out those recruits out of the city. Be aware of the huge reinforcements the Soviets get in the east of the map on turn 6, so make sure you have strong units guarding those objectives just to avoid any surprises. The briefing to the Bryansk mission mention a mad dash. Well, I'm a simple bloke. If it says mad dash, then by God, mad dash it is. It might not look like it, but it is the easiest mission of the entire DLC, featuring a very Rommel-esque adventure and a disaster that wasn't. Alright, so the key to victory here is around Shostka. You've got a ginormous force here, so break through with as little effort as you can and slip through and rush in the direction of Ozhel. Don't worry about the Soviets cutting off your supply lines. Use your oversupply and enemy supply hubs, which are abundant here. Your tanks can actually cut the railway line between Orel and Bryansk by the end of turn 2, and having recon steps might actually help you with that, because it allows you to take more ground. The railway between Orel and Bryansk is the only thing that supplies Bryansk, and now you know where this is going. The horde in the city runs out of supply, and you just cut through them like knife through butter. Be careful about using your infantry west of Bryansk before it's cut off, because the AI tends to be very zealous about that area and will counterattack viciously. Once Bryansk is yours, secure the railway between Roslavl, Bryansk and Orel, and then spread your mad dashing tanks towards Tula and Kursk. You will get reinforcements around Shostka, use them to kill off the Soviet troops in the southwest. It's not critical, but the AI may decide to retreat them and cause you trouble, especially in Kursk. Vyazma-Rzhev is the last and perhaps the most difficult mission we're going to talk about today. And because this is such a massive and difficult battle, is on the level of tactical skills. And I'm not going to go into such fine details in this overview. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments, I'll try to answer them. But now let's look at the big strokes. In the south, around Yelnya, the course of action is pretty obvious. Your immediate objective is Yukhnov, and Panzergruppe 4 will rush towards it along the railway. As usual, use your infantry to kill the enemy and take over their zones of control as much as possible, and let the motorized and mechanized units pass through. Yukhnov is one of the more difficult objectives in this mission, so make sure you do things right here. But once Yukhnov is yours, clear the area, especially the Soviet motorized units, just in case, and split your forces. One armored division to Kaluga. Your infantry will catch up by that point, but it's better to be on the safe side. Another armored division should go to Mozhaisk, which is very likely to be empty at that point, and the rest of the Panzer Group goes to Vyazma and potentially Rzhev. The task of Panzergruppe 3 will be a bit sneakier. Your immediate goal is to kick that Soviet motorized division out of Belly and take the village, and most importantly the bridge behind it, on turn 1. It's not super easy, but with the right combination of artillery steps and actual movements you can take it. Remember, infantry fights, tanks take the spoils. And take spoils indeed they will. On subsequent turns, rushed was the bridge southeast of Ostashkov. This'll cut off the supply of everything west of it and pave you the way towards Torzhok and Kalinin. These towns are unlikely to be defended or significantly defended, so move as quickly as you can. Your ultimate goal here, past Kalinin, is cutting that railway line between Kalinin and Mozhaisk. This'll leave all of Soviet troops on the map without supply, making it actually possible for you to take Rzhev in time. You may have already guessed that this mad dash in the north is fraught with problems, mainly those of the supply kind, and you may indeed lose a motorized division due to lack of supply, but I think this is a good trade-off for decisively winning this mission. Just make sure it's not a tank division, alright? And it goes without saying that you should use all of the supply tricks you have at your disposal to maintain those troops. And once the Soviets are surrounded, it's gonna be Kiev all over again. Send in your infantry and blast, blast, blast. And as it should be pretty obvious, the infantry you have between Yelnya and Belly, and between Belly and Ostashkov, should remain pretty passive until the Soviets run out of supply. They really can't do anything decisive in this mission, in my opinion. And this is it for today. Thank you for watching and listening. If you're interested in full playthroughs of these missions on hard, check out my other channel, Slothoboomer Coach Buttock. I've already published my playthrough stroke commentary of Yelnya there, and since I'm pretty far into the DLC on hard, I'm actually cranking out those playthroughs every day now. So go check them out for a more detailed analysis. And obviously stay tuned for part 4, the final part of my cracking overview of the DLC, where in addition to the mission guides, I'll talk about my final conclusions, my impressions, final impressions of the DLC in general. Cheers.